is our traditions meeting, a meeting of the Stairway Group. And who's got their big book here tonight? I want to read chapter 5 for us, please. Before you start reading, let's say the serenity prayer. Thank you. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Okay, Ivan.
I'm an alcoholic, and this is how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail. Thoroughly will fall about that. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to their simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born this way. They're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than none. There are those, too, who suffer from great emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover. They have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. If you have decided that you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. At Salt Lake, we walked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness of our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cutting, baffling, and powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures avail us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We ask his protection and care with complete abandonment. Here are the steps we took which are suggested as the program of recovery. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons who had harmed and came with it to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order. I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We place spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that you are alcoholic and manage your own lives. B, that probably no human power can ever relieve our alcoholism. And C,
Thank you, Ivan. Okay, tonight we're going to be taking a look at Tradition 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise. Those problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. As with the steps and most of the language in the Big Book, it's necessary for us always to parse these sentences to see what they're really saying. In a very few words here, there are several major thoughts which are grouped together, and each of these thoughts is critically important. Okay, first it starts off with the idea of endorsement. That alone is sufficient to have created this tradition, because AA is so well known that any kind of endorsement we would give to any product or any group of people would carry great weight, and so they've pretty well given up trying to get us to do that. And years ago, Carol may remember, there was, up until 10, 15 years ago, there were always campaigns trying to get us to endorse hospitals, to endorse various ideas of recovery, and we've always said no, because for us to do that would be then to exclude others. It would mean that we've jumped outside the sphere of our primary purpose. The next word is finance. Now, AA is capable, if it decided to do so, of raising multiple millions of dollars. It would be no trick at all. We have a captive audience of over 5 million people now worldwide. And if we were to be told that this was something of extreme importance to AA, we needed to raise some money, you can imagine that it wouldn't take more than 3 or 4 months of passing a special basket to end up with very substantial sums of money. And if these were to be used to finance something like a hospital, for example, or in the days of the Washingtonians, they raised money to finance the cause of the anti-slavery movement, and they raised money to finance the Prohibition Party, and they endorsed both of those movements as a group. And shortly thereafter, the Washingtonians collapsed. They went outside the purpose of sobriety. Lend the AA name. People would like to borrow our name. They'd like to be able, for example, to put the AA logo on various items, religious or spiritual items, for example, or books, that we would lend our name to various spiritual books or books of, and people have been trying forever. Publishers want to give us big money for that kind of an endorsement, letting them use our name. On any related facility, related is a key word there, because it's pretty obvious that unless it had something to do with recovery or with alcoholism or with disease or recovery from some related problems, that this would be a great inducement to hop right in there and try to help out. Related facility or outside enterprise. Why? The last phrase tells us why. Less problems of money. Remember that AA must remain constantly poor. Money will tear us apart. We cannot handle having money. If you've ever been in a group that has a lot of money, you'll find that a business meeting is a Donnybrook, because money just tears them apart. Money, property. AA groups, in most cases, do not own property of any kind. We lease our premises from somebody, or we rent on weekly basis as we do here on a monthly basis. Prestige. Prestige may be the most deadly of all. Look at the 12th step, our 12th tradition. That anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. And the root of the 12th tradition is the spirit of self-sacrifice. And the purpose of that is to keep us from seeking prestige and notoriety and acclaim. That's why we use only our first names in public. The idea of seeking prestige would be direct violation of everything we know is essential for us to preserve the unity of the fellowship. Can you imagine if we had hundreds of thousands of power-driving AAs running around, each competing with each other to see who could get the most praise and most ink in the newspapers, and who could be the one to call upon to write the articles and to go around and speak like Joe and Charlie do, making money off of it. Or even Father Martin now, he's charging $30 to go to his speech, which is a terrible disappointment to me. But these people are publicity seekers and prestige seekers. Clancy's another one, just like that. There's a guy down in Miami, what's his name? The Irishman. That'll come to me.
We could sell ads to the grapevine. Ads in the grapevine.
Oh, sure.
All these treatment centers.
There's a jillion things that you can imagine that could happen if we were to, in any way, to begin to commercialize our fellowship or the 12 steps. Now, lots of other people have done that, and there are takeoffs on the 12 steps. There's an outfit that calls itself Rational Recovery, and the book that they use spends half the time, or better than half the time in the book, knocking the 12 steps and showing how they don't work. Of course, there's one serious drawback to this book. It doesn't show you how to get sober. But it sure spends a lot of time telling you why AA can't possibly work. In spite of the fact that millions have already recovered using it. So that's the sixth tradition. And it really goes to a couple of key points. And these have to do with us personally, by the way, as all the traditions do, because these traditions are not just limited to group action. They are equally as important and applicable to us as individuals. And we are not to seek prestige. We're not to seek money or property from the practice of our AA responsibilities. And we are not to lend our name, our full name, to any outside enterprise. We are to, if we wish to stay sober and be of maximum service to God, we remember that our responsibility here is to stay humble, practice humility and self-sacrifice, use only our first names, stay out of the limelight. Because to do otherwise is to jeopardize our own sobriety and is damaging as well to the fellowship. Before we get into the text, does anybody have something they'd like to add to this?
Hi, everybody. My name is Carol, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Carol.
How can many people like Clancy and whatnot start charging and get away with it and be members of AA?
Well, I can't say that Clancy doesn't charge per se, but he gets a lot of money for his tapes. Joe and Charlie have been doing it for 25 years. They're practically icons around the fellowship. Nobody stopped to think that this is their livelihood. This is the way they make their living. And in order
doesn't that go against this tradition?
Oh, absolutely it does. But we don't have a police force. There's no way to stop them.
And Ben and Dion are the same.
Sure, of course. Anybody who...
But my point being this, I didn't mean to keep interrupting.
No, it's right.
My point being this, that where do you stop this and where is it all going to? Because, as we come in here every week and talk about the traditions, we can see that AA is changing. And, you just let these, like, I think I was in here when I talked about the
Third tradition.
Yeah, the third tradition. What would the master do? I think you and I had to talk about that. You just see these little things slip in at meetings, and I know that Jim talks about it, but I mean, it's just like, what do you do when that happens?
Well,
And, we don't have any, like you said, AA police or anything, but these guys are profiting off of, and I saw it myself. I went to the gratitude dinner.
Misery is what it comes down to.
Well, I went to the gratitude dinner in November down in wherever it was, and I had my tickets for 4 months. And I was just appalled at the fact that how they set I think Jim called them the AA board, right down in the front, and everybody else was like buried in the back. It didn't really matter. And it was because of who those people were that they were at that front table. And I just appalls me. I would rather take somebody that has 10 minutes in the program and sit them right in front rather than somebody that has 35 years in the program. But this is for show, and that's why a lot of the functions I stopped going to, because I don't want to have to present.
Well, I think I should be seated in front, so.
I stopped going to a meeting on Friday night right here because their group, they have nobody greeting people at the door. They have a big turnout from the Turning Point Center there. Nobody greets them. They grab this front table, that's their table. They sit there and they sit there all night long, but they're special. I didn't get a resentment, but I just don't feel comfortable with the way they go about things, so I don't go. Actually, like a lot of things are watered down, just like you said there. That was one of my big resentments all week. I heard a guy share that he does the fourth step over and over and over and over again. And I was thinking, in fact, this morning they had a 10th and 11th step meditation meeting. And when I shared that the 10th and the 11th step is a combination of all the first 9 steps. It's the one that prepares us for the 12th step. There's people in here with 14, 15 years, they were like, that's why I don't have to do the 4th step over and over and over again.
The light dawns.
And they were like, and I just don't understand it.
People, I might be one of those people, because when I came to Boca 6 years ago, I had a lot of things drummed into my head that we learned at the sponsorship meeting about things that Jim has for, just don't drink and go to meetings. That was a biggie. You know what I mean? But I'm going to say, I was one of those people that was affiliated with that, and it was like, I had to weed through that and go to meetings where spiritually I grow, and I can't have all this outside stuff going on. But so what I'm saying to you, it's just one person at a time, maybe. Like me helping. I bring people here, and as I told Jim, I go out there and I'm like the cheerleader for this group. This is great meeting. And everybody comes, and all of a sudden everybody backs off. Everybody's got more. They got to paint their toenails. They got to wash their hair. But that's okay. So you just grab someone. It's like in the big book says, you just grab somebody else that has the willingness. That this girl that comes here. 3 years in the program, she's a sponsor, it's 28 years in the program, and she's never been through the steps. And she heard me outside of the meeting talking about, chatty Cathy, and I said, why don't you come down and see this meeting and hear this guy talk? Hey, listen, if you don't like him and you don't like what he's talking about, you don't have to come back again. I'm not pushing the standard through. But it's like it has to be what I was saying to Jim about Theon and Clancy and all them. It has to be the people that have some time in this program to go out and set the record straight. And it might only be one person at a time. But that person's going to tell somebody else and somebody else. And you're going to break through these theories of everybody sitting at a table or,
But it's dangerous. It's dangerous for newcomers.
Sure.
I think I was sitting at a meeting yesterday where they were bashing people for sharing. And I understand that you get one guy, he comes in there and he says something, and then he says it the next day, and he says it the next day, and he says it the next day. And I wanted to share it, and it just didn't flow. And all I wanted to tell him was, what about, what I learned? Love and tolerance. That's the mainstay of this whole AA. And I know we don't like to hear a lot of these things, but we don't know when somebody's battling about something we don't want to hear about. It might be saving his life that day.
Yeah, but it's just like
It might be saving his life that day, but isn't that what we're here for? And I got really aggravated that people would say, you know, yes, we know. If they had sponsors that taught them the big book right here, then we wouldn't have to listen to that all the time. And then they would know, I have a sponsor for that. Half these people that are coming in these stores and they got 2, 3, 4 months, I don't even think they have sponsors. They can't possibly have sponsors. Some of the things I hear. Like doing a 4-step over and over and over. And I don't criticize anybody for doing it over and over again. But if you read the big book, there's no sense in doing it. Just like this. You know, the sixth tradition. If we let these guys take over, it's going to weaken, it's going to water down AA, and people are going to get the wrong impression. They're going to say, well, what about the sixth tradition? How can this guy profit off of AA? And it's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing.
But I think people twist and change the program the way they're working their program. They're not working. There's only one program. That's the AA program. It says, you know, this message, not their message. So I mean, if you have a sponsor, which I had a sponsor that I didn't hear talk about the big book or steps or what meetings. I had that option to say, well, I don't want what she has. I want to go over here and do this. And I'm one of the few people.
That's what makes it dangerous. Sometimes the newcomer don't know what's right. A sponsor will have a resentment against somebody who's holding a big book meeting, and they'll say, don't go to that meeting. It'll corrupt your mind or something like that. You know, it's a dangerous thing. This is a gift from God, this book right here. And it saved my ass, and it saved 5 million people's asses. And the steps and the traditions are all part of the book. And if they're taught wrong, people are going to go out and they're going to get drunk all over again.
See, the thing too is, as you look around, and as Jim has said, and as I can't understand that, why don't people want it? It's, you know, Jim said, all right, we're going to reverse this. Next week at 7:30, we're going to have a tradition meeting, and we're going to, there wouldn't be very many people out there, and I don't get that. You know, my first sponsor, told me that they're just as important as the steps.
Well,
that is where you find out about you and God and the tradition stuff you live with people.
Most tradition meetings are boring as the dickens because the people leading them haven't any idea what they're talking about. That's the problem. And just as this group, one of the groups that meets here is a step group. And the other day they had a guy leading the meeting who was on the 5th step and he's never worked the steps. I mean, how...
The 9th step, that was.
Or 9th step.
On the 3rd step.
Yeah, it never worked a 9th step. So, you know, this is the kind of thing that we're up against. That's why we started the Stairway Group, precisely. As I said tonight, we started this group to see who really wanted the big book, the steps, God, and recover, and would be willing to turn out for it. And it turns out that we've got a whole bunch of people around here who want that. And now for a year they've been coming to this meeting. You know, Dominic, you've been coming since we started.
If I may.
Yeah.
I've been listening to both of you carry on with me. The problem, no, because I wanted to jump in there and keep going hot and heavy at it. You're forgetting one little thing. Is that if you're dealing with the frame of mind of that we're developing while we're coming here, I have introduced the same concept of what I've been learning now somewhere else. And I was told that I was a minority to a majority rule. Because when you stop and think about what you're saying about these different organizations, they stay together because of the capital punishment of being self-centered. They want to control certain areas where they're at. So people will be followers to the person who is self-centered, who can outspeak and out-talk. I mean, to put the term loosely, if you could get a good bullshit up at the end of the counter, Like when everybody first comes into the room, like you say, do 90 and 90, means make it, don't drink, come to me. Everybody was indoctrinated that way. I mean, as far as when I started, okay? And like when you started. But when you go into, I'm sure you had to start somewhere. When you stop and look at where you started from and what you learned and where you are now, to introduce this thought to someone else that has been already infected by this thought, it's going to be harder too, because you won't be one of the group. To be an individual and to accept this book and to accept what we're accomplishing now here and feeling what we're feeling now, there's no resentment to the time on the way I'm using it. I feel sorry for them, because I feel in my heart at this point right now, they still don't understand why they were in AA, because they went through the suffering, and after they finish suffering and they've accomplished some sobriety, all of a sudden they start rules. Listen to what I am saying. I am sober. And the poor person that comes through the door that doesn't understand says, I want what you have. Isn't it a perfect example? That's what they tell him. I want what you have. But what does he have? So you're a minority if you walk in and start talking spiritual and start talking honestly about the whole thing. They're talking about going out, raising money, going out running dances, going out and doing raffles, going out and doing that. There's no spirituality to it. I don't know how many meetings I've gone to, and I just sat down, and the only thing you hear is hard sobriety from some of the men, and the same lecture, and the same stories come from the women. You could sit down, and I could go to 5 meetings right now. I haven't been to the meeting in a year and a half. I'll walk in, the minute he raises his hand, I'll say, you don't have to say it, I'll say it for you. It's identically the same story. It's never changed. He's never progressed. We're progressing. But how do we, as it was put to me as a minority, bring that picture forward and let them accept the fact that what we're saying is from the heart? We have no other chore in mind but to help. Where their goal is, I have to be who I am. Like when they have meetings or they have groups, do they not meet amongst themselves and dictate what's going to be said at a business meeting? They'll sit down and they'll discuss, and don't forget, you're going to, I'm your friend, don't worry. If you tell me what you want to have done, we'll work it out. And the business meeting will be the 3rd week of the month. And if they don't get the vote that they think they're going to have, say, well, then let's carry you for 3 more months, and then we'll have another business meeting on it. Soul self-centered, trying to be in control. Everything we're fighting to lose, they're fighting to keep. I don't, so to me to stay the way I am, I just don't care. I go to a meeting, I sit down in another meeting, I just listen to what I want to hear. And I take what I hear from the people. If I hear somebody I can associate with, I go. And I listen. If there's another good recovery meeting, I try and make it. There was one in Boulder I used to go to. That changed a bit. But I still go occasionally there. The bottom line I used to go to, it's a farm. The 440, you go to that 441 group, that's another one, it's the same way. That's like coming out of a treatment center and going directly into a rehab. That's the way, because there's all hard sobriety and everything else. And if you try and show the simplicity to everything, and tell them this is an easy way, they look at you like you're out of your mind.
What we do, Dom, is we start our own meetings. That's why we have as you know, that's why we have the Stairway Group. And it was an experiment to see if there were some people who really wanted to hear about the steps, would be willing to turn out on a Saturday night for it. Turned out that there were a whole bunch of people. And so the format of that meeting is well established now, and the people who show up for the business meeting have no intention of trying to change it, and there's no power struggles, nobody. And so we've arrived at something that's pretty reasonable, that's actually working. This is what Clarence Snyder used to say. You know, he said AA, the definition of AA, he said, is chaos. He said, if you don't like what's going on in the meeting, you get somebody else who thinks the same way you do, and you go start your own meeting. So that's the way AA grows. And I believe in that. There is no way to, literally no way to change the predominant thinking in most groups. It just isn't going to happen. It's too well settled, too well set in. And when you attempt to bring in recovery and God in the big book, you're resented and put down and gossiped about and lied about and all kinds of stuff. That's just the nature of it. The other way that we attack this is through sponsorship. That's why we have the sponsorship workshop, because what happens there is that it's a slower process, but it really works, because it's like throwing a pebble into a pond, you know. At first you just got a few little ripples, but they keep spreading out and out and out and out and out. I was talking to Danny Donahue tonight down in Miami, and I took him to the steps about 6 years ago. And he'd been around for 15 years before that, but it really took for him this time. And now he has set up a 3/4-way house where everybody studies the big book and the steps and has sponsors, and he's getting all kinds of great recovery there. Well, you were there, Ivan, weren't you? Did you go to the Oasis? Yeah. I helped him set that up, and now he's conducting a sponsorship workshop in Miami, and he's got a whole bunch of people he's sponsoring. His life is great, and you see, you never know which one it's going to take with. I mean, I would expect Carol to take to this stuff immediately, and everybody who's here, because you've demonstrated over and over again that you're concerned with learning and with carrying the message, which is literally the only thing that will save our butts in the long run. Carrying the message is the one thing that will assure us of permanent sobriety, because it is in carrying the message that we practice true humility, and it is in carrying the message that we're doing God's work, and we're performing our holy mission, which is to be of maximum service. So if you want to teach somebody how to stay sober for the rest of their lives, you teach them how to carry the message, and you encourage them until to the point where it becomes something they do, and after you've done that, you've really done a good job. Another thing I want to mention is that these aberrations within the fellowship only exist because people support them. Joe and Charlie would die on the vine if nobody went to their seminars. And so we can sit around here and talk about how they're violating the traditions all we want, but so long as there are devotees who never miss their annual fix of Joe and Charlie up in Palm Beach, they're going to keep right on doing it. And this is true all over the world. So there isn't any way that any of that stuff is going to be stopped, except if it lost its appeal. And if they weren't getting anybody turning out for those things, they'd have to quit, wouldn't they? So the ultimate responsibility lies with the people who attend, not with the ones who are doing it, because they're really responding to what is an obvious need. People want to be led by the hand. They don't want to have to think for themselves, and they like to do things which become popular, and they like to be able to go back to their group and say, "Oh man, I found out all about the big book of Joe and Charlie," and everybody, "Oh, you went to Joe? Oh yeah." And in a weekend they butcher the big book for 3 days, and it's as Joe and Charlie see it. And
well, I can appreciate what you're saying, because I went to one phone group, the one that's in Oakland Boulevard, and I just got introduced to the group. I got introduced to this one, and when I was there for a week and a half, said, "We're going to go to a seminar." Yeah, it's a good weekend. How much? It says cheap. It's only $150 for the weekend. It says this, but it's cheap. It's Michigan. Friday night, you go Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you get meals and you sleep, and the whole time you're up there. It's $150. And they fought to get 2 tables together. They had to go. The kingpin had to get his 30 people up there, because then he'd get 3 tables. And he'd get the recognition to his Oakland Park group.
Well, you see, the way that traditions really work is that alcoholism is a self-cleaning oven. And sooner or later, those who continuously violate the traditions will die by them. And we don't have to worry about it. Our job is to, each of us individually, to carry the message as we know that message to be. For example, if you want to share in a meeting, rather than sharing a bunch of stuff, why don't you share out of the big book? If every one of us would do that, and you ought to have the book with you. I'm criticized all the time because I carry my book around. And now, because it's all ratty, they like to always say that big guy with the ratty book. And who does he think he is? Some kind of a big shot, you know. And you're going to get that attitude all the time. But if no matter what the subject of the meeting is, if you share from the big book, how can you be wrong? You're not talking about your opinion. You're talking about what the book says. And you followed the book and it's worked for you. What more do you need to do? And if enough people are doing that, some changes can take place. Now, but basically a group is going to fall to the lowest common denominator. It will not rise to the highest common denominator. It will fall to the lowest. And where you have people who are angry and vicious and jealous and causing trouble and making others pick sides within the group just goes to hell. And there isn't a lot you can do about it, because we don't have any way to police it. But you can vote with your feet. I'm detoxing from Pompano Beach Group. I can't stand to go to a meeting there anymore. The place is too toxic. And I can't say that this place is all that much better. But at least we have a whole bunch of different groups that meet here. And so you get a different flavor of the various meetings. And they're not all centered around the same jealousies and the same powers that be, who pretty much control the psyche of the group. Even though there's 700 members, it doesn't matter, because they're all a bunch of sheep. And nobody wants to run against the tide. It's just like they told you, you're a minority. That's supposed to stop you in your tracks. You're supposed to say, so sorry. Please tell me what I ought to say. And you didn't do that. So when we look at this sixth tradition, remember, guys, it applies to us individually, and the basic message is the same message we find in the first tradition and in the 12th tradition. The unity of the fellowship is vital to our recovery. We do whatever it takes to support and enlarge the fellowship. And on the other hand, we don't use our last names because we're practicing a true humility. The idea is that we stick to the principles and we don't deal with the personalities. And that doesn't mean her personality, well, it's my personality. I'm not placing my personality up front of the principles. The principles come first. The principles are the steps. The principles are found here in this book. So if I'm going to share, I'm going to share the principles rather than the personalities. And one of the major objections most of us have to many of the meetings is that they are all about personality. They're all about ego and pride and power driving and looking good. And when people aren't whining, they're trying to look good. And this is all perfectly natural, normal stuff. The problem is that people who continue to do what they always did will stay the way they always were, and they'll never change. And you just put your finger on it; they don't change. Without change, we don't stay sober. We can't survive without change, because everything changes all the time around us. The whole world changes all the time. But if we don't change, if we don't grow spiritually, what happens is we regress spiritually. You can't have it both ways. There's no standing still spiritually. And there can be no spiritual growth without strict adherence to the discipline of the steps. See, that's the message that almost nobody wants to hear. The discipline and consistency of working the steps is the basic necessity for spiritual growth. So, the few people who figure that out have long-term sobriety, and the rest don't. You look around, you see how many people there are anywhere with more than 25 years sobriety. They're damn few. And a lot of them, quite frankly, are not alcoholics. They're just people who came in here and found a home, and they've been sitting around. They could stop and modify their drink anytime they felt like it. They found a home because they were dweebs on the outside, but in here they get to be big shots. And they're dangerous as hell because they go around preaching a false doctrine. But you don't have to work steps, you don't have to read the book, just don't drink and go to meetings.
They'll look at it that way.
There's more to it. The other day I heard somebody say to stay sober, you have to come to the meetings and clean ashtrays and coffee pots and how to keep you sober.
Oh, I know.
And sometimes I get like outraged. How can you tell these newcomers that? That's not going to keep you sober.
That's not service. That's service to the group. You know what service? You know what?
More of these tradition meetings too, because if they went to the second tradition, I'm sure they get back to their senses maybe.
Well, you see, we have to differentiate between service to the group and to the fellowship and service to God and our fellows. Service to God and our fellows means carrying the steps to others, practicing the principles in all of our affairs. Service to fellowship can include cleaning up or planning dances or whatever, or becoming a GSR and going to quarterlies and become a AA politician. I've been an AA politician. I know what that takes. Huh?
That's supposed to be discussed at a business meeting.
Well, what's a business meeting?
Your job this month is to make coffee. Your job, that's how, in my home group, that's what we do. Everybody all we do is discuss our financial situation, and somebody's going to be the chairman for that month, and like me, for 3 months I've been on coffee, but it doesn't matter in cleanup, and that's service to the group.
That's right. It keeps the group moving.
Service is a whole different story.
Yeah, and it's important to differentiate that because when Dr. Bob was about to die, his last message to the fellowship, he ended up by saying what AA is all about is love and service. And by that he meant be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That's what he meant. And that has absolutely nothing to do with cleaning ashtrays. These are just things that we do for the benefit of the group. And for some people it's helpful to sense the sense of belonging, being included in. They don't understand that the old timers are making slaves out of them, getting them to do stuff they don't want to do, and then calling it service. But nevertheless, the result is that they feel kind of included in. That's probably good. But it doesn't do them a powerful good if they don't work steps. If they don't read the big book and then work the steps. Because that's the only program of recovery we have. We don't have anything else. This other stuff is all peripheral, and it isn't going to keep anybody sober.
I heard a guy say the other day, AA is not an organized religion, but then they try to force their interpretation of the big book on everybody else, even though it has nothing to do. Their interpretation is so off base, and that's, for me, that's the problem with organized religion. It's man forcing his interpretation of God's will on somebody else, and that's why there's so much.
Yeah. Well, you see,
atrocities going on today. We're not an organized religion. We all get to find our own God here, but some people like to put themselves in the position of that God.
Well, here's a major vice in modern day AA. which goes so strongly on the idea that you stay sober on the fear of getting drunk. You stay sober on the consequences of drinking. And fear is the hallmark of religion. Religions rule their constituents by fear. The fear that this is, if you don't do this, I mean, the ultimate fear is an eternity in damnation in hell. Now that doesn't mean that it isn't right. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but it doesn't matter. The idea is that we don't deal with love and tolerance. We deal with fear. Ultimately, if you don't do as you're told and believe in the God that we believe in, and put aside all other concepts, all other religions, which mostly we call sects anyway, they're cults, then you don't have the right message, and you're doomed. And I was recently subjected to that in spades, because I was working with a guy who was a minister of a Baptist church. I wrote the 12 Steps for Christians for him because he was really working hard to get people sober and clean in his church, and he wanted something to use, but they weren't getting clean and sober on Jesus. That wasn't working. They needed to have the steps so that they would put faith to work, which is what the steps do. And so I wrote that originally for him. And I used to go to his church, because he'd come to my meetings, I'd go to his church, and he had some pretty nice music, and I liked his sermons, because his sermons started to sound more and more like AA, so I was nodding my head, yeah. He'd attack things like fear and that sort of thing. So, but then I started getting phone calls from all the people in the church, and they would lecture me about how I had to go up and receive Christ, and I had to be baptized by total immersion in water, or I was going to go to hell. And they really loved me, and they didn't want to see this happen. And this went on and on and on. In fact, one day, the head of Baptist missions for the whole world showed up at my door. And he spent 3 hours with me trying to convince me that if I didn't do what he said, that I was going to hell. He was a really nice guy. We had a very interesting conversation, but I didn't get resentful or anything about it. I didn't find it funny either. I just found it kind of boring, I guess is the best way to describe it, because I told him over and over again, no, I don't believe that I have to go through Jesus to get to God. I know it's not true, because I've been getting to God now for 37 years, and He always is there for me, and I don't have to go through Jesus to get to God. Why are you telling me I have to do that? Oh, it's in the Bible. I don't read it that way. There were several doctrines that I was supposed, full immersion in baptism. I've been baptized in the Episcopal Church and confirmed there. I consider myself a Christian, nominal Christian. I'm certainly not really radical about it in any way, but it's very difficult to deal with people who are so closed and narrow-minded that they refuse to accept the fact that there might be a broader implication to God in people's lives. But the Big Book doesn't make that mistake, does it? It says the world of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never forbidding or exclusive. It is open, we believe, to all men. And see, now that's what I believe. And I know it to be true. I've watched God working in so many thousands of lives. I know it's true. You know it's true. You guys know it's true. And so we're getting the truth in this book. And that makes it very, very comfortable and pleasant to share from the Big Book, because when you do that, you know what you're saying is true, and it's going to apply to all people. It's not pandering to just one set of ideas or one group of people, but to all people. Well, guys, I guess we ought to close this up, huh? I really appreciate you folks being here tonight. I just love these little meetings. We get a chance to let our hair down and really talk stuff over. Right, Carol?
Right.
Just say right.
Right.
Say yes, Jim.
Yes, dear.
Okay. Oh, man. Let this circle represent the unity of our fellowship. A moment of silence for those who are still suffering, And we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. Remember, we don't say anything after we say amen. Thank you. Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all so much. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Tommy, thank you. Here, we see we've